Hey guys, and welcome back to another video of ECK Sports, and today I am back at it with another video, and this time I'm going to be recapping and analyzing the Brendan Szerlag news that he will no longer be captaining the Gators going forward past the 2023 season. There is a lot to break down with this move, so before I get into it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for football content all season long, and let's get into it. So first, let's go over Brendan Szerlag's career. His career as a captain would start in 2019. In 2019, things did not go very well for the Gators as they went 2-13, and Zurag somehow made the All-Star game, but batted 104 with a 411 on base, 118 slugging, and a 599 OPS. In 2020, in that offseason, as we all know, he made the draft picks of Chris Cheatham and Brendan Jorgensen. Cheatham and Jorgensen would eventually lead Zurag to the World Series, as Zurag would get his first championship and his only championship as the manager of the Great Lakes Gators. That year, things didn't go much better for him. 122 average, 351 on base, 183 slugging, and a 534 OPS. In 2021, it was the first time where Szerlag showed that he wasn't just a part of the Gators because he was manager. He batted 238 with a 413 on base, 452 slugging, and an 865 OPS, and added 6 home runs to that as well. And in the NLDS in 2021, besides Cheatham's great pitching, his bat was the reason why the Gators moved on to the NLCS. In 2022, he made the draft pick of Reese Harris, who unfortunately wasn't able to show up too much. He did bat 200 with a 368 on base, 273 slugging, and a 657 OPS. 2022 was a terrible year for the Gators. They went 3-12, just as bad as 2019 pretty much. And even though they made that trade for Jason Chadwick, which we'll go over later, still did not work out for them. And in 2023, things were even worse, as they again went 3-12 for the third time as a franchise, third time in 3 years. This year, he was not good at all. He batted 136 with a 345 on base, 273 slugging, and a 618 OPS, and of course, added that 1 home run to his tally. It was about time. I mean, if you watched the Gators, and if you watched the Gators for the past few years, Szerlag really was not the best manager in terms of in-game stuff. Now, I'm not saying that he gets as covered for his managing as Agner does. It's still not good, and Szerlag was just the focal point and has been the focal point of failing franchise for the last 5 years. And yes, they did win in 2020, but if we're being honest, that team was not sustainable. Cheatham, Jorgensen had great years on the mound, but they just did not have the hitting whatsoever. And you know how it goes. When rookie pitchers show out, they're bound to regress the next year because that's just how it works and the league figures them out. I mean, if we look at some of his moves as a manager, you have the Cheatham deal, which of course is great. Everybody's going to talk about that. You know, he basically traded Cheatham for Gus, and obviously that won them the World Series. You also have to look at some of the other things that he did as manager. He made some horrific decisions with this team. And I think the problem is that the Gators were overrated in 2021. They only won 1 series against the Mallards, who of course were the worst team in 2021 and swept them. And, you know, got the record up a little bit. You know, they hit pretty well, but the pitching just wasn't really good for Cheatham or Jorgensen. And both of them regressed mightily that season. And after 2021, he added Reese Harris to the team. Of course, my problem starts in 2022, where this team just completely collapsed. If you go back and look at it, at the end of Slate 4, the Gators were 3-9, and they had just gotten swept by the Mallards and had looked terrible doing it. They hadn't scored a single run in that series. But he thinks, oh, you know, I got Jorgensen on my team. I got Cheatham on my team. Now we got to bring Chadwick on my team. Oh yeah, Magic, you can have those 2 picks. You can take them. Szerlag should not have made that move. Because sure, maybe you did find a way to sneak it into the playoffs. Did you really think that you were getting through the Mallards or the Eagles? With how inconsistent the pitching was? I mean, Cheatham had a pretty good hitting season, but even then, you know, every other series he would come up with 0 hits. Jorgie and Szerlag were putting up 600 OPSs, and the problem was Chadwick was not going to put the team over the hump. If you remember, in 2022, there were only 3-man lineups. The difference between, you know, Szerlag to Jorgie or Szerlag to Chadwick or Chadwick to Jorgie, those 3 were pretty equal players, and if anything, adding Chadwick hurts the team, making it a 4-man lineup, and takes ABs away from Cheatham. So there's really nothing you gain from adding Chadwick to your team. When you have a 3-12 season, right, why would you then go into the next season with the exact same roster and expect a different result? That just doesn't add up, and it doesn't make make sense. Everybody's going to point to the Preds in 2021 about how they missed the playoffs and then they came back, the same roster, and looked so much better. But here's the difference. The Preds went 7-8 and missed the playoffs out on some really stupid tiebreakers. I mean, if you really watched the team, you would have known they were not a quality of a team to miss the playoffs. I mean, yeah, Ryan had a down year, but he had 2 MVP quality years the year before. He had proven himself. This is not a type of situation where you have Jorgensen and you say, oh, look at what he did in 2020. But, oh yeah, he sucked in 2021. He sucked in 2022. But let's just pretend like it's still 2020. But in 2023, well, Szerlag returned with the same roster. And guess what happened? They went 3-12, like I said. Look, I'm actually not going to get mad at Szerlag for this because he actually did have a trade for Jorgensen on the table. I think this is very well known throughout the MLW community. I could even play a clip of Drew Davis saying this.
Made a trade. Both managers were happy. Me and the manager both said to each other, there's no way this goes through. Talked to the commissioner. No way it went through. There's a world where Jorgie could have been on our team. I mean, amongst other players, I mean, there were a couple players we were looking at.
He had a trade. It didn't work out, and it was vetoed. So I can't really get mad at him too much for this, but his mishandling of the team in 2022 just kind of points to the fact that he wasn't that great of a manager. And I think a lot of people are concerned about the fact that it's rigged and that this trade is just going to be in favor of the Gators. And look, last year, those trades that the Magic were involved in were clearly slated toward the Magic. The Wildcats trade, I'm not going to go crazy about. The Mallards trade was ridiculous. Tommy's reason for drafting Preston, like, okay, yeah, he wanted him. Apparently the Magic weren't going to want to get him. That's not a good reason. I mean, had Grant Miller on the table. Also, there's another reason that, like, oh, you know, I don't think that Miller-Robles would work well together. If any 2 star players are going to work together, these guys, especially Robles, have played with other top players in the country countless amounts of times. I don't see anything bad happening there. I just think that's a reason for the stupid trade that was the Grant Miller trade. I mean, you're telling me that Grant Miller, who at the time ranked 6th among wiffle ball players by the drop, is being traded for the 2nd pick and a swap, next year's picks. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, if anything, a realistic trade, maybe Bonham and a pick, or maybe 2 picks instead of just a swap. It's not good, and everybody sees through it. Everybody knows. It's a real test because the Wildcats have the number 1 overall pick. Kyle, of course, the commissioner of the league, who, you know, filtered all this, and the manager of the Wildcats. This will be a big test this year to see what they do. They don't just give the Gators the pick because they were so bad last year. Make them earn it. The last thing I'm going to go over is some trade possibilities. So I've come up with a few trades. Pretty much the idea is that he's going to the Wildcats. I mean, I could see him being involved in a trade with a team like the Cobras. The Gators need picks, and they need high picks. So while a team like the Preds can make sense, they have the 5th overall pick, so I just don't see the Gators really wanting that. I have the Gators getting the 1st overall pick in Ty Smith, and the Wildcats getting Brendan Jorgensen and Brendan Szerlag. There is no way that Szerlag just goes straight up for a pick. That's not happening. The reason why I have Ty Smith going back, I think a change of scenery for Ty would be a good idea, and I think Ty is a good wiffle ball player, and he just has to actually come to wiffle ball games, and hopefully he does that more next year, and I think being on a new team could definitely help that. Another trade idea, Gators get the 3rd pick in Ty Smith, the Wildcats get Chris Cheatham and Brendan Szerlag. The reason why I'm kind of against Cheatham going to the Cats is because what does that really gain? Cheatham, Jackson, Saylor, and Kyle are all very similar. I could also see Liam Jackson instead of a guy like Ty Smith involved in some of these trades, just considering the fact that there are a lot of those Trenton guys on the Gators team. I think the last one I have might even be the most realistic, and that might seem crazy because it is the 3-team deal that I have. The Wildcats get the 2nd overall pick in Brendan Szerlag, the Cobras get Jorgensen, and the Great Lakes Gators will get the 1st overall pick and Liam Jackson. Now, obviously, you're going to read this and say, oh, it's a loss for the Wildcats, which I kind of agree with, as I take LJ over Szerlag, but I think both having a change of scenery would be nice. Obviously, Szerlag is going to have the change of scenery, and LJ being with some of his friends in the Gators would be a good idea. And then the Cobras need offense. They have the worst offense in MLW, and you know they would love to have a hitter like Brendan Jorgensen. Jorgensen, Sean Drew, and either Sawyer or Barron in that lineup is going to be nice for the next coming years. That is going to do it for today's video. If you like what you see, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.